All right. Welcome back to another Greg Walters show. Today is Thursday, the 17th of November. Thanksgiving is a week away. Elections are in our past. Supply chain is still clustered. And we're here to talk about industry analysts and all sorts of good stuff. I've been looking forward to this for months, actually. I've got a nice special guest from the West Coast. I've known him for a while. We'll do a little intro, but now, without further ado, let's pull him in. Gary, are you there? Can you hear? Are you coming in? Come in, Gary.
Coming in loud and
There.
clear,
Oh,
Greg.
excellent. And there you are.
There we go.
Hi. Um,
Hola. Hola.
Hola. Perfect. So I'm in Florida. Gary, where are you at? You're in somewhere nice too.
I'm in glorious Fort Worth, Texas right now. So
Excellent.
Gap Intelligence is headquartered in San Diego. I live in San Diego, but on the road here in Fort Worth.
You know what? Let's dive right in. So you've got staff all over the place, right? I mean, New Jersey, you're there. You're between there, San Diego, and Maine. You got folks in San Diego. Was that something that came out of COVID, or was it a trajectory that was already there for you guys?
It was COVID based.
Oh,
It was, we had one or two folks that worked outside of the immediate office prior to the pandemic.
oh,
We liked having people in the office. The really the camaraderie of it, the sense of community around it. We're a very culture driven organization,
hmm,
but in our nature. And so while we did have some outliers around the country, we everyone came into the office 5 days a week, and we're, I mean, almost entirely based in San Diego. When the pandemic hit, I would say about a third of the company moved out of San Diego, and the reasons for that crossed the gamut. So
wow,
we had some folks who were parents and their kids were doing remote learning and both parents were working. So they couldn't handle that on their own. So they moved to another state to be closer to their parents. So the grandparents would help out with video learning. Other other families just couldn't, they're in a small place in San Diego. They wanted a bigger house, bigger living because you're going to spend 24
hmm,
hours a day in your house. They wanted a bigger place. So they moved out of state. And now we've really embraced it. So it's, we try our best to keep that sense of community at Gap Intelligence and really stress the culture, but at the same
yeah,
time, our the talent pool of recruiting nationwide and offering that flexibility to work from home wherever home may be,
right.
that's actually turned into a huge plus for us.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I guess to back up a little bit. So Gary, and because you said a lot of things I wanted to hit on. So we've known each other for a while
Hmm.
from the print industry. Um, and when we decided I should be fully transparent. When we decided to work together, one of the things that impressed me was the ability to have a culture in a remote environment. And then when I finally saw photos of your offices, it's from the Midwest, it's a slice off a Hollywood set. It is
Thanks.
if you if you're if you're watching HBO and you're watching Billions and you're watching the upstart series of high tech businesses getting together and go with the foosball tables and all that stuff. That's their offices. That's the offices in San Diego. But beyond that, so I met a bunch of people from the team early on, and even going forward from yesterday and today. You're right. The culture is excellent. That's one of the reasons I really wanted to align with you guys and met Val and yourself and as more people I meet, that culture's there. And it's not as it's wonderful, but it's not totally unique, which is nice too, right? Because I like other companies that are the same way. And I think people prop that kind of culture up as being something to go for, but something that's unique. And honestly, in the last month or so, I've met a lot of businesses. I don't know if it's COVID or just my eyes are wider open that really are embracing that culture, whether it's working remote or just getting together on Fridays offline, whatever. It's interesting. So yeah, you've done a really good job. I really enjoy being around that, and I see it now in other businesses. It's interesting.
Yeah, once it's almost like when you want a new car, the car that you want, you start seeing it more frequently on the road just by nature. You're more aware of it. So
Yeah,
yes,
that's
there's a lot of
true.
companies out there that are doing the right thing around culture. There's huge companies. Google was one of my
Yeah.
inspirations when I started Gap Intelligence 20 years ago, and they embraced the concept of a why. Why are we in
Hmm.
existence? And for Google, it was to do no evil. So their focus was to. I know you just rolled your eyes, but that was their original focus,
Oh,
was
I know.
to provide all of these services for free. And you think about like Gmail and G Suite, that fell along with that they're not just
Mm-hmm.
incrementally charge you for these things, and they also sort of hung true to that rallying cry with their people. And it was a pretty deliberate thing. I'll have to check the newspapers, but they dropped it from their credo or their
Mm,
their
yeah.
their proclamation about 8-9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the company has evolved since, in negative ways. You can see the personnel are not as content at Google. There are protests of sorts in the way that they're interacting with foreign
Yeah.
governments, or the way they're handling their own employees. So it's so mission critical to be aligned on what those key culture points are for an organization.
Absolutely. Funny story about Google. I worked at a Panasonic dealership in Anaheim, right? And I helped him go from analog fax to digital fax. But Panasonic had great scanners back then. They were, garbage disposals. You could put packs of paper in it with paper clips and staples, and somehow they got through, and it kept going and going. Well, Google wanted to buy every single one of these scanners, every single one. And this is
Hmm.
expensive and big back then. I go, well, why do you guys want to buy them? Well, we want to scan everything. I go, oh, okay. Well, everything in your office? And the guy goes, no, everything. I go,
Hmm.
everything, everything. And this is 2008, in that range, maybe 6 or
Right.
7. So wild, and I think they've pretty much done it. They're at that point. But enough about Google. So we've kind of jumped ahead. Introduce yourself, give a little bit, tell them who you are, and then throw the accolades out. But I want to hear from you who you are. It's Gap Intelligence, and then just a little thumbnail of what you guys do. Because I don't, when I first got involved, I never knew what an analyst was. I've only known them from the
Right.
outside and reading what they write. But what happens? How do you guys do what you do and stuff like that?
Sure. So Gap Intelligence, we're a 20-year-old market intelligence firm. So we're a niche within market research. And that niche is that we focus on competitive intelligence. So we tell manufacturers in the IT, consumer electronics, and home appliance industries what is happening in their marketplaces and what is happening with their competition. So we do that by tracking essentially the 4 Ps of marketing. So what products are out there, for what price points, how are they promoted, how are they advertised, and how are they placed in the channel. So by following those 4 Ps, it's like being a scout for a football team. So when you follow all the players that are on the field, and you follow where those players run on the field, then you can essentially stitch together a playbook. And we provide that playbook to our clients, and we have an analyst that'll tell them why these plays happened and how does it fit with the team's overall strategy.
Wow. Okay. So now, is it B2B, B2C? Is there a difference? Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So we're largely B2C. So the
Okay.
vast majority of the industries and categories that we track are the ones that would be the products that you find at Best Buy or Home Depot. In the copier space,
Right.
we're B2B. So that's a completely different channel. That's a closed distribution channel. So that's the relationship between, say, a Canon and the dealers that they sell their products through. And we're able to actually capture and track the plays and the players to make those playbooks as well.
Okay. So I've used the tool. Oh, boy, I'm going to date myself now, but I think it was when I was back at Icon. Could it have been? No, it must have been after Icon. Regardless, I've seen the tool, the comparison. So let's just say and we're going to go through all of them. If I'm a sales rep,
Mhm.
right? Where would I interface with your stuff? What opportunity would I have and let's say a brand new one, because that's the newbie in the copier industry. What can I get from you guys, and what does that look like?
Right. So for the bulk of our content is really behind the scenes. So for a dealer, the products that you're offering are largely influenced by Gap Intelligence data in terms of the feature and the cost of those features. The pricing plans that a dealer would receive from a manufacturer are largely based on gap intelligence, pricing information, and things of that nature. So direct tools that dealers use, for example, is our gap TCO calculator. So we have an online calculator that will tell a customer, potential customer, this is exactly how much it's going to cost to operate this printer or copier over a defined period of time with a defined amount of usage. And so dealers probably that's a more direct interface to us, is using our gap TCO tool to generate proposals.
Okay. All right. So how about on the competitive analysis? If outside of away from the trenches, more into managerial or strategic, I guess, with ownership, what would they look? What kind of, because everyone's familiar with Gartner, maybe Kiyosera, and all the other guys. Gartner for sure, but they're usually way out there.
Mm-hmm.
What would a strategic person, like a C-level guy at a dealership, say even from 10 million to $300 million dealership, what would they get out of a relationship with Gap?
Sure. So Gartner's a great example of the difference between us and other industry analyst firms. So at Gartner, they will tell you, they always brag that they have a 30,000 foot view of the market. So they're way up high, and they'll see the whole forest before they see the tree. So they give you an overview of the health of the forest. Our approach is that we believe that by going to every tree and checking every leaf on those trees, we can tell you where the forest is healthier, where it's dying faster, where it may be on fire quicker. So our data, because we're checking all the details in the marketplace. So for a dealer working with Gap Intelligence, we can tell them exactly what is that competitive contract across the street. The dealer across the street is offering this customer this model. We can tell them what the estimated proposal is based on our data. Like, this is what you're competing against. Here are the spiffs that dealer is getting as a result of working with manufacturer X versus manufacturer Y. So we're able to help dealerships, but more really, the OEMs are in this space, to make competitive response, tactical decisions very quickly.
Okay, yeah, and I was going to ask about the OEMs too. So I'm guessing same talk track there. I mean, you're analyzing their competitors, and everything sounded like from street pricing up to, well, he said spiffs and things like that. Program analysis, then I'm guessing, right?
Yep,
Wow.
absolutely. So everything that's going on either in front, that's being presented to the customer, and that can be in the dealer world, that could be in the form of a proposal. What's in that product? What is the selling points of that product? What is the go-to-market of that product? Do they lean more on software? They lean on features? They lean on feeds?
Okay.
And then behind, so what are the service costs associated with that product? What is the promotional spiff offered through the dealer? What are any kind of relevant discounts that may be offered to the customer?
Okay. Then I've got a bunch of questions. Number one question is, right, so what would, say, if I'm evaluating, what discerns you, separates you from those guys? What's the, I mean, I've got some ideas, but I want to hear from you. What's the difference?
Well, what we do versus the other guys is pretty unique. There's not really any other guys out there that compete
Okay.
against Gap Intelligence, and mainly it's because we're so deep in the details. So, like, a dealer will know by memory a fleet of copiers because they're so familiar with them. It's sort of like their kids. It's like, oh, I know that the Image Runner X12 has the 500 extra tray capacity, and I know that you can wire it up to Ethernet and things of that nature.
Right.
My analysts, speak the same language, so it's almost like we can talk shop about the products and the speeds and feeds and the real toner capacity of this cartridge X and this high capacity Y. And so the industry analyst, the guy at Gartner, doesn't have that kind of granular knowledge of the product. So I think if there was a way to differentiate ourselves, it's that we know the tools in this game rather than what the general trends are.
Right. You know what? That's pretty good right there, because I think there's two things. Most of and this is more recently than ever before, is a lot of the guff that analysts get is like, well, yeah, we hear this, but it comes from pie in the sky stuff. You haven't done any. You've got no on the ground, in the trenches, getting kicked in the shins over pricing type of analytics there, right? You don't, which which is in the nature of their business anyway, right? They're like a macroeconomic analyst versus micro or whatever you want to call it. Um, Interesting. So 2 weeks or I forget, a while back, I had Patricia and Amy on from the Imaging Channel, right?
Hmm.
And I asked them this question. It kind of because they come from the media side, right? They content, magazines, stuff like that. And I asked them what the influence of media has been over the industry. Let me ask you this: how do you feel the influence of the analysts is today on the industry versus maybe even just 2 or 3 years ago? Is it changed? Is it different? Is it the same? And then what do you think the influence? What is the influence that analysts have on the industry? Start there, and then has it changed?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't think that the role of an analyst has changed, and I don't think the role of an analyst is designed to change an industry in a sense that we're far more targeted to um, to focus on specific goals for specific clients. And so, what I mean by that is, a question that I often get asked is, what's the difference between a journalist and an analyst?
Perfect.
And
Yes.
and a journalist is so the two things in my opinion is audience and intent. So for a journalist, they have a very wide audience. They're writing to the masses, and their job, their intent is to report what happened. And I work in metaphors, so it's almost like talking about a football game. And so the
Okay.
reporter is writing to the general public, and they're saying, the Dallas Cowboys rushed for 325 yards, and they threw for 200 yards, and they won the score 17-10. Okay,
Hmm.
that's fine. What the analyst does is that focus is much more narrow. And in the case of Gap Intelligence, we're writing to the Dallas Cowboys. And we're talking, and our intent is to advise on what worked and what didn't work. So that same football game, the analyst will say the Cowboys ran for 320 yards, largely behind the strength of their left guard and left tackle, and running against the opposing left tackle and right tackle on third down situations. And they also went wide right on the big side of the field when so-and-so from the opposing team was on the field. So
Hmm.
it's much
Hmm.
more in depth, and the intent is to advise the client what drove their success or what caused their, for lack of a better word, failure. And so the influence of an analyst isn't on the NFL. My influence is to make Dallas a better team. And then when I'm working with the Washington Commanders, is to make them a better team, more efficient. So you would rarely see like a true analyst speak to the masses because, our value is really to the individual.
Hmm. Okay. So that would lead me. So let's get a little dirty here.
Mhm.
Journalism versus analysts, right? There is a mix, and I'm talking from a layman from the outside looking in, right? So when I read something and I see, so where do awards fit in, right? And yeah, I know, but that just opens up the whole thing. Like you're an analyst that's telling the Commanders what works and doesn't work, unless that analyst is being paid by the Cowboys for something, then you
Right.
know what I mean, and then it all gets polluted. It's a very idealistic, and I agree with it, but especially in our industry, it's like, well, okay. And I brought that up with the Patricia. Now they had a good media angle at it. I mean, what do you think about? I can imagine, but am I seeing things? Because I'll tell you what. In the trenches, honestly, you've got the people that love the awards because they get them. They put them in the lobby. They're big and beautiful. Then you've got the other set of folks that don't really care that much about it. And then you've got that undercurrent that everyone knows. So, yeah, well, the awards are nice, but there's always that but behind it. What do you think about not just the awards? Usually, awards is just a slight metaphor, but the mixture between journalism and analytics and how that plays out. And am I just things, or is it real, or what do you think about that?
Well, the awards are effective. Um, in
Well, okay,
particular
so define effective for what? What does that mean? Like they're effective in
to add credibility to whatever whatever the outcome is supposed to be, I suppose.
Okay. Well, and
So
listen, I should clarify this. I'm very much involved with the Management Services
yeah.
Association awards. I've done them every year. I think it's been 6 or 7 years.
Hmm.
They're a pain in the ass, by the way. But so I'm part of the issue. But okay, go on. Anyway, so just
So
clarify that.
it adds credibility to,
All right.
if I'm trying to sell a widget, and then so and so of, you know it was a widget expert says this is the best widget, then it's going to add credibility to my sale. And
Yeah.
that there's a slippery slope in that. And if I think the best example in any industry is Consumer Reports, and we work with Consumer Reports. I'll before I plug them,
Okay.
but they are the best example of essentially the hybridness of being an analyst and being also in the media,
Mhm.
because they do advise. They do give their testing is the intent of that is to advise people to making the best product decisions and purchasing decisions they can. They're members in this case. They're members, and the thing about Consumer Reports is they accept nothing from anyone in the industry that they're tracking. So they buy their products. They don't take, like, so let's pretend that we're talking about TVs, and so
Okay.
they won't accept a free TV from any manufacturer. They'll go to the store and buy it themselves. They won't accept a meal. If you take them out to eat, they won't accept the meal. They are
There's none of
completely
that. Wow.
zero, less than zero. And they're proactive in telling people that even when
Right.
the ones they work with, like, thank you for that gift, but we don't accept any gifts. That keeps them neutral and unbiased, and it keeps them as a true independent researcher or advisor or counselor. When it gets into the awards, and sometimes I hear this all the time. So Ernest and Young, for example, they do CEO of the Year, and I've applied. Not that I'm going to win, but it's pretty well known that the winners are only those that actually do business with Ernest and Young. So is that really if the intent is really to highlight the best and the brightest of any industry, or the best product of any industry, is that really
Yeah.
the framework to hand those awards out? That's questionable.
Wow. So consumer products I know the magazine. It's been around forever. What's
Consumer
their
Reports,
business model then? Consumer Reports. How do they survive then? Is it? I don't even know. Do
subscription
they have?
based. So
It is all subscription
yeah.
based.
Yeah, you're a member. So when you sign up for Consumer Reports, you're a member of the organization,
Wow. Wow. Okay. I get that. Interesting. And
and they're run as a nonprofit too, for which is interesting.
yeah, that is interesting. But anyone can do that, I guess. All right. So that's it. Wow. Okay. So kind of got me off track a little, but that's cool. Let's talk about. Are you from San Diego, or yeah? Where are you? Did you grow up near San Diego, or what's your background?
All over the place.
Oh,
So
really?
grew up in a
Okay.
military family, and so we moved around quite a bit. I spent early childhood in Medford, New Jersey, which is a little town outside of Philadelphia. Hence why I'm a ridiculous Philadelphia Flyers fan,
Oh,
which
well,
is
that's all
which
right.
is
I
not
know.
it's not a pleasant thing. It's a very unpleasant thing to be. And then in high school, I moved here to Fort Worth, Texas, and lived in
Oh,
Texas
really?
through high
Okay.
school. Went to college at Texas A&M, and then moved to San Diego in '98. So, of all the places I've lived in San Diego the longest.
Oh, all right. Well, San Diego's beautiful. Okay, so you've got a full boat there, and you've lived there since '98, and then you
Mhm.
got it. Did you get into copiers at the very beginning, or how did you fall into that?
Yeah, so I graduated college and worked for a military defense contractor called they're called DynCorp International. They were famous for all the wrong reasons
Oh.
in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but we won't go deep into those. So I worked for them for 7 months, and it just didn't work out. There's lots and lots of little stories, fun stories about working for an international defense contractor as my first gig.
I
But
imagine.
took that experience and got hired by a little teeny company called ARS out of Irvine, Texas. And they made me a fax machine analyst. So you talked about those Panasonic digital and analog fax machines. That was my bread and butter back in the mid 90s.
Oh,
That's how I got into essentially this industry. And that was
I was
96.
going to
They
ask
moved.
how. Yeah.
And so,
Okay.
I was a fax machine analyst that evolved into a printer analyst and then evolved into a copier analyst. So it's just literally hard copy hardware was my scope of work. And once you
Okay.
get into this industry, it's crazy how
Yeah.
it gets into your blood. I mean, I love printers. I still love printers. I love printers. I think inkjet printing technology is fascinating.
Well,
And
we're going to talk about that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Well,
love it.
so you're yeah, I just interviewed a couple guys. Well, Kevin yesterday or day before, and then Edwin, who was in he was in Europe, worked for Xerox forever, but he still talks toner. Talks toner. Now
Yeah,
he lives in a grotto outside Paris somewhere.
yeah,
He just
I want
retired,
that.
and I know not. But he's in his cave with wine. But it's like toner in your blood. Once it's there, and it's just like the mafia. If the mafia existed, which they don't, once you're in, you never get out. It's weird. People come in and out, and so yeah, I get that 100%. So you really got in as an analyst on that analytical side, checking out the industry and stuff like that, right?
Yep.
Wow. Okay. So since then, here's the big question, and just touch on it. I mean, there's a million different answers, but what's some of the bigger changes you've seen and been a party to and witness of since the late '90s to even pre-COVID and then post-COVID? What have you seen?
Well, I mean, it's been an evolution.
Right.
It's been. Let me. I guess I should start by saying that print and copiers are. I would put them up as the most resilient product category or industry in the history of industrialized nations. I mean, they've survived fax machines, they've survived telephones, they've survived scanning, they've survived email. They're resilient, and even through the pandemic, the copier guys are still hanging in there. The printer guys are still hanging in there. So um, that resiliency
I don't know if I
has,
never went down. And
yeah, I don't know what's going on with my camera here. That's odd. Sorry about that. Should be should be working just fine. Let me try something real quick.
I don't know if that's you or me, but keep going. Keep going. Looks like I'm getting hit with something, to be honest with you.
No problem. So anyway, the industry overall hasn't changed. It's still resilient. It's still alive. I think what we've seen in time is on the strategies of print have evolved so much in that once it was everybody wanted to go to first it was centralized printing, and then we wanted to decentralize through smaller devices and personalized devices. Um, and then everybody, all the majors got involved in software. And for me on the outside, it was not hilarious to watch. It was sad to watch, to see companies sort of forget what made them great. Like Xerox was really big in software, Lexmark was really big in software, and the software. I get the intent that they wanted to verticalize document solutions. So there is going to be, we're going to build software for hospitals, and we're going to build software for manufacturers, and we're going to build
Mm-hmm.
softwares. But guys, in your heart of hearts, you're printer companies. And so, of course, you're going to struggle making software. And software is such a it's such a crazy expensive venture to start up in. So we saw all these software ventures come up out of printer companies and then scale back down. And you've almost seen it on the dealer side too, where the dealers try to get creative with MPS and other kinds of solutions and video conferencing and all these sort of robust solutions. And then just a few years ago, the dealer said, you know what, let's get back to the business of selling copier boxes because we're darn good at it and we still make money at it. So let's get back to the basics. And it's almost been like an accordion for the printer industry where they've expanded and then contracted. And I think right now what we're seeing is them really focusing on the basics and getting back to basics.
Absolutely. When I don't, we didn't. This is not pre-scripted. So in the last 3 to 4 weeks, I've spoken with more dealers. And all right, two things. Yes, it's a very resilient niche. I can't believe it. And that this has been coming here to me in the last month or two as I've talked to people post-COVID. Right? They're optimistic, and now we're looking at a recession. So you'd think it'd be doom and gloom all the time, and it's so easy to do the doom and gloom. It really. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I was part of that too, and it is. I mean, print is dropping off. Call it a cliff. Doesn't in the end, it really doesn't matter. Guys I'm talking to are resilient. They've tried different things, and they've gone back to basics. Now, There is a little bit of a difference in terms of how that basics is applied, but it is still basics. For instance, I don't guarantee you, but in a Greg Walters study, which is not that analytical, most of the people I talk to, the dealers, most of their business, and these are dealers that, hey, yeah, we're at pre-COVID levels. Yeah, we're hitting quotas. We're actually selling machines. Selling meaning taking orders, not delivering. That's a whole nother, which we should talk about. But people are more on a positive note, even though we're staring down a recession and coming out of a COVID thing, then I would even have imagined, just looking at the way things are. You've got a bad supply chain, you've got a recession, high inflation, all these bad things are going on. And the guys I'm talking to, no, we're hitting it. We're doing okay. And it's because they're going back to business. But my original thought was they're selling to their existing customers. That's one thing I think that's going on right now. It's very few net new accounts, which if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. I mean, switching vendor for even a coffee or from, if you're a manufacturer or a printer and you're going to switch from, I don't know, Heidelberg to Xerox or Heidelberg to HP or whatever, that's a major switch. You're probably not going to do it right now, but that's only because of all the craziness that has happened up to that point, and your relationship with your existing vendor has gotten stronger. That's what I think, right? Yeah, there's risk, but there's also the fact that everyone went through the same thing, and we came through it, quote, together. It's almost like guys who serve, and I am not diminishing the military, but it's like when you go through something together. It could be football practice 2 days in August, or it could be, in a foxhole somewhere in France. You've shared that, so now you come out of it like, okay, I can, I'm going to trust these guys. I'm going to stay here and do it. So yeah, about 90 to 95% of the business that when I talked, maybe I talked to a dozen or dealers or so, and they're all hitting their quota. They're going to do as good or better pre-COVID, and it's a high percentage of existing accounts, which I think talks to what you said, to being a very resilient industry. But here's another thing, Gary. They're not afraid to try. You got guys out there doing what, those recharge stations for Tesla. I talked to another guy yesterday. He does coffee machines now. He goes, if you would have told me to do that 3 years ago, I would have laughed at you. Now it's $150 a month. Blah 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 blah. It's just like, and I go, yeah, I know. We've been, okay, welcome. But yeah, resilient. And I think there was a question in there, Gary, but I lost my train.
No, it's quite all right. It's a resilient industry, and the value that dealers have provided their customers have really stood the test of time for what, 7-8 decades now. So they're not going away. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk inkjet. Now,
Okay.
I'm going to get delayed stress because I was part of the Edgeline, call it a revolution or whatever, but HP had brought out the page array inkjet copier A3, heavy as a semi-truck, and it had HP on it. So back in those days, if the logo said HP, your IT directors, yep, get it. It didn't matter. As long as the blue thing was there, H&P, you've got it. But it was inkjet, and I think Xerox had the color cube, which was,
I love the color cube. The old phasers.
Oh my God, the phasers, the crayon machines, I used to call them, of course, because I didn't sell them. Sold against them. But what I have connections into the higher end printing, web printing and stuff. Like ink is hitting up there, like the Indigo, HP's Indigo. Was an anomaly, but now more and more, and it seems to me that inkjet is getting more prominent in like the traditional web press, the high speed, not cut sheet print jobs. But then with Epson's Eco Tank and all that stuff, and the fact that print isn't all that important. I mean, it isn't as important, right? I don't need something. No one I'm going to give my color output document to is going to throw a loop on it and say that's not the right magenta, right? They're just going to say, okay, that's red. And I've also noticed that I think this is an observation that most of the print that is occurring is still transactional. It's going to end up in a recycling bin or the trash can relatively quickly. We don't archive anything more on paper. So with that in mind, color quality isn't. You don't need high-end color quality anymore. The ink is, I think, less expensive, I think. And I know for a fact that usually they don't break as often, or they don't melt things, they don't get hot, and they don't use static electricity like a laser. Do you think that ink will take over the office? I mean, it's a big question. And I don't know the answer. What do you think?
The answer is no.
Okay.
And you talk about you opened up with HP's Edgeline. That's a discontinued product line for HP. They
Oh
don't
yeah.
make them anymore. So they when through HP threw in the towel for me. That was pretty much the end of the thought of inkjet really being a serious player in the business space.
Okay.
There are so I think there's a tremendous amount of upside for Epson in particular with their A3 devices, those wide format, excuse me, those A3 inkjet devices. Um, reason why
Mm-hmm.
they didn't succeed is one, laser bias, and even though we don't archive things, people still have far more trust that a laser printout will be archivable, that'll last 20, 30, 40 years versus
Okay.
inkjet that'll fade away 3, 5 years around.
Well,
The
that's
other
true.
thing that held inkjet back was number of interactions with the device. So the great thing about a laser printer is that they have huge paper capacities and the yields of those cartridges can be 20 10 15 20,000 sheets before they have to be replaced. And
Mm-hmm.
so an office manager, when they buy a printer, they just don't want I don't want to touch it. I don't want to see it.
Right.
I don't want to see it once a month. I don't want to see it once a quarter. And with an inkjet device, just inherently, you're going to have to change out the cartridges more frequently, and you're going to have
Okay.
to change it. You have to replenish the paper. So that's really what kept them out of the office. Now, where I see the opportunity for inkjet and copiers, specifically with Epson's solution, is that it's the value proposition is for the dealer because an inkjet device needs far less maintenance than your traditional toner, toner copier. There's
Mm-hmm.
more moving parts in a toner based
Yeah.
copier. With an inkjet, it's literally just how fast can you pass the paper underneath the print head. So if I'm a dealer, I would love to have that in my mind. If I opened up Gary's copier shop here in San Diego, California, I would only offer inkjet devices. I would undercut all my competition based on what my maintenance fees would be. I'd install that inkjet copier in that household, and then I'd walk away knowing that I never have to send anyone over there to maintain that thing. I would only have to go over there periodically to check on the ink levels and count checks. Why the industry hasn't taken advantage of this yet, I still don't know, but
Well,
that
I
would be
was
what
going to
I do
ask you,
if I
right?
was
Because
king.
well, that's perfect. So there's I used to use this phrase all the time when walking away from a sale I didn't get. Logic does not prevail, right? So
Yeah.
for but so the way you just described that scenario seems logical to me. Seems okay. So is it? And it's like that's I just got done praising the industry for being adaptive and innovative and doing and taking risks, and yet there's still stuff like this. There's still stuff that doesn't. All right, that makes sense. Why aren't we doing it? Why isn't it being done? What's the issue? So it's got to be outside of the fact that the machines are less expensive. That it's you don't need service. I mean that's a recognizable fact, right? I mean it just makes sense.
Right.
So why isn't it happening? Is it a cultural thing, or I mean, there's no wrong
It's
answer. I'm just curious. Yeah.
in my opinion,
Yeah.
in my opinion, it's there's why fix something that isn't broken, and you see this all the time with copier dealerships. And copier dealerships, in my opinion, are one of the least efficiently run organizations
Be
in the
nice.
industry. No, they're terrible. They're terrible at innovation. They're terrible at streamlining their business. The owners of most copier dealerships that I've talked to are unconcerned about
Unconcerned.
efficiency. They don't, you know, the thing is that there's so much margin that still exists in the copier business that if I install that box, I'm going to get 40 percentage points on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't care if it takes the maintenance guy 2 trips a month to keep that thing going. I don't care if I, could have saved $100 by installing a new software platform to manage my dealers or my sales reps more effectively. I'm making my 40 points. I'm good.
Yeah.
Why? I don't need to think that critically of the business. I'm just got to go out there and sell boxes. So what you will see is innovation on the sales side. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
sell more water. I'm going to sell phone lines now. I'm going to sell these different things. But on the back end, I'm going to get my 40 points. I'm okay.
Right, right. Well, that's the cobbler's kid has no shoes is a classic, classic.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, I can just go from example to example. But you're right. Success is there. So why? I kind of agree with it. It's like, oh, I don't really care. I mean, and small business is cash flow. At the end of the month, do I have more in the bank than is there enough to cover the bills, and do I have extra? That's a mentality. But I've seen, well, no, I mean, even some of the bigger guys, they're big, but they still almost think, and this is an observation of mine, and it may not be true. Well, it is. But the big guys, they wrap themselves in the corporate flag. We're highbrow. We know how to solve real systems. Almost like Price or one of the big guys. But you sit in on one of the decision making meetings, and it's still 6 or 7 guys throwing numbers around and worrying about if they're going to have enough for payroll and what their Audi payment is at the end of the month. Do we have enough money at the end of the month? Yeah, we do. Cool.
Right.
Let's go. Yeah. And that's not even a criticism, because like what you said, well, if it's working, where's the argument? And that's something I've had to look at. It's like, you guys are doing this wrong. You should do this. You should do that. And then beating my head against the wall. And I can't. I would consult for. I would tell you this. There are more projects that I went to increase sales, reduce costs, and grow revenue that never got off the 120-day time frame, because we can do it. We did it. But you know what? I'm just going to sell 15 more copiers. All right.
Yeah, that's all there is to it.
That's not a criticism. Okay, so now let's see, San Diego. So were you around you were in San Diego when they started reporting about those UFOs? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I can't remember that story, but
Okay. Well, let me ask a more pertinent one. Have you ever seen something in the sky that looks unusual?
I did. I saw. Honestly,
did?
I did. I went to a Radiohead concert that was at an outdoor festival in San Diego.
Okay, was this before or after the concert?
This was during.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was during. So, what it ended up being, it was a rocket that was fired from Edwards Air Force Base, a little bit in Northern California. So what I saw was you could see the rocket, and also the rocket sort of detach itself. So you would see that huge fireball and this wasn't like in the earthly heavens. This was in space. So you're looking up and you went, holy smokes, what is that? And then the other impressive part was that there were 2 fighter jets in our heavenly atmosphere that were trailing it, going at a speed that I couldn't fathom. It was, if there was such a thing as seeing something move at Mach 1 or Mach 2, that's what we saw trailing the rocket. That's the closest I've seen in terms of a space alien in the San Diego skies. Yeah.
All right. Well, good, because that's going to lead me to my next question. So, and I ask most people this. All right, Greg, how are you going to connect UFOs and everything like that to this? So there was, for 50 years, a flat-out denial that there was anything, right? And there was even ridicule and stuff like that. I'm going to put aside the X-Files and the political and all that stuff. Okay, someone said this, and this authority figure said, no, you're wrong. Someone said this. I saw this authority, over and over and over. Now, all of a sudden, the authority figure says, well, you know what? We don't know what they are. We're not going to call them flying saucers. Okay, fine. They're UAPs. And guess what? We've got these highly trained pilots who have witnessed something, and we can't deny that. So everything that we've been saying for 50 years we said no, but now all of a sudden it's yes. Now it isn't. I don't put aside the fact. I don't care if they are real or not. The fact that an established authority, right, that we've trusted,
right,
no longer can be trusted. Now this is a generational thing too, because the kids that grow up with that authority saying, hey, you know what, there, in 30 years it's not going to make a big difference. But for it's like it was all conspiracy. It was X-Files. It was like, you guys are nuts. Little green men, sure, whatever. Now, so my question is, all right, that's just one thing. It's a matter of trust, and the art of selling is gaining trust, real trust, not gaming trust. Gaining trust because you and I can work together. We're going to solve this problem. We're going to go blah, 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 blah. And you should believe me because I tell you this. Now, with something like that, and then you can even not to get political, but all the other stuff that's going on, misinformation, non-misinformation. How do you feel that, 2 things, what's the level of trust innately in business now, especially when it comes to sales, and has it change? Do you think that those environmental things like that affect that, or is it just non-effective?
Um, I would say that the trust on an individual level has not changed. So if I'm sitting across the table from you, Greg Walters, and you're talking to me, then I think the my level of trust in you is higher than what it would be from, someone that would be screaming from a crowd.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think really the dynamics of trust in one-on-one relationships, San Diego is a great example of a city that's also the world's smallest small town. That everyone in the business community here knows each other. So
Oh.
you need to be mindful of keeping your promises, having integrity, showing character in your work, because it'll spread around the town very quickly if you're not doing those things. Same with the print industry. This is the smallest big industry in the world. I mean, you can't escape this industry, but also your friends are in this industry. So if you aren't doing those things and working with integrity and having good character, then it's going to get around that industry really fast. But again, the someone screaming from a crowd now,
Hmm.
I don't really, I have a lot less faith
Yeah.
in trust in what they're saying.
Could you translate that into maybe establishments and hierarchical structures? Because that kind of even folds into the work from home versus the work back in the cube thing, right? I mean, is it individual trust is, and you know what? Individual trust, I think, actually has gone up because of the pandemic. I think that we've now had to, and people say we don't have relationships. We've all in my opinion, we've all localized our view and our relationships. Back in Wisconsin, we would drive by the local coffee shop every single day to get to the office next to the Starbucks. But when that shut down, well, we discovered this guy lives 2 blocks away from me and he's got a business. Why am I not stopping here?
Hmm.
Boom, 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 and that grew and that grew. So all the little localities started to prosper because our focus really went from 20, 30 miles away to 2 blocks away. And I think that even helped build solid, more trusting relationships between individuals. But then I'm glad you meant I didn't put it the way you did. It's excellent. But the other side just stretched way beyond. Like, are you guys kidding me? I mean, all the things that people with good intent were telling us, this is the way it is, and that's what they believed. And then like 6 or 7 months ago, no, that wasn't the way it is. Well, I know you weren't trying to intent. Your intent was not to dissuade me. You were telling me the truth at the time, but now I don't know what to believe. Right. So the question is, do you think that establishments and status quo now has a little more challenge when it comes to people trusting what comes from, say, the ivory tower kind of thing, and that's derogatory. But you know what I mean? Is it the top-down authorities, are those now more in question? Hmm.
I really don't know. I think, there's this great interview with David Bowie back in 1997-ish, 96-ish, and they were talking about the internet and what that will mean to music. And I thought his answer at the time was brilliant, and it really speaks to, it sort of touches on your question in that he said it's a blessing and also a curse. And the blessing, he said, is it takes out the middleman. So I will be able to distribute my music without the ivory tower studio really pulling the strings on that.
Mm.
And he also referenced in at the time rave concerts were all the rage, but he said now it's the crowd is the show as much as the performer. So the people are empowered for the entertainment even more so than the person on stage. So that sort of speaks to that ivory tower. The danger of it is sometimes those ivory towers are good filters
Right.
to take out
Yeah.
the noise. And I think what we're seeing today with just such a huge, information is democratized. So it's just, it's everywhere, and everyone has their own bullhorn screaming as loud as they possibly can. So I think that it's hard for the ivory towers to filter through that.
Hmm.
So I would say that their influence is less. Um, and I don't know if that's, it really depends on your context if you think that's a good or a bad thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But it is like a pendulum, though, right? I mean, things has been swinging left and right and left and right. I don't not well, maybe politically, but that's not what I
Hmm.
mean. It just goes one way to another. It's just like printers, right? We decentralized with every PC. And remember when whenever new every new hire got a new copier or a new copier, a new
New printer.
PC and a
Yeah.
printer. And then okay, then we consolidated, and then boom, boom, boom. It seems or biz thing, right? There's an expansion and a contract. Well, which is that's universal, right? I guess you can't fight that. That's the way it is. So it's going to swing back and forth, right? I mean, it's just like the supply chain, I think.
Yeah,
Right?
we'll
Demand
see.
versus supply.
We'll see.
Yeah.
History tends to repeat itself. I think a good measure would
Hmm.
be, what happened when the first printing presses were invented, because that's essentially what we're going through right now. This is a
Oh.
completely new way to distribute information. So I haven't done the research on this, in terms of what happened when printing presses were made for the public and you could print whatever you wanted, then hand them out at street corners. I do remember, like one of the very first newspapers that came out. They had opinion columnists, and they were sort of debating on, you know, how they should edit or moderate those opinion columnists, and the
Oh.
attitude was essentially, well, we just got to let them be. Let's do a hands-off approach. We'll be neutral on that,
Mm-hmm.
and that's essentially what's guided newspapers and media, ever since. And I don't know if that's still an effective approach, just with the amount of information that's out there now.
Boy, that's a tough one. And so the way I look at it, and it's my personal thing, is there's a ton, but it makes personal responsibility even more important, right? You've got to be able, you've got to be able to digest that and come up with your own ideas based on that, and understand that, that guy might not be telling the truth, right? It's not
It's
black and
very
white anymore,
difficult. I
and
would
it
say it's
is.
it's very difficult because of confirmation bias.
Oh,
And which
I,
every human being has. You're not a bad person for having confirmation bias. We're all programmed with it. So there's
yeah.
such an abundance of voices out there that we tend to gravitate to the ones that confirm our biases. And we're
Yeah.
not, and it's just sort of, it's part of the unintended consequences of having such democratized information out there.
Yeah.
You know, there was a this is a, a complete tangent, but there was a great. I listened to this great podcast about the influence of will and grace, and that the influence of will and grace
Okay.
would not have existed, in today's environment. And the thing is that back when Will and Grace came out, there was essentially three broadcasts. You had three
Right.
channels to choose from, and so you didn't have a choice. If that was 1/3 of your options was to watch Will and Grace. And Will and Grace introduced new characters, new lifestyles to the general public. And there's a pretty good argument that says that that show led to a lot of advancements for the LGBT community because people got exposed to it. And today, and with streaming, and believe me, I'm the biggest fan of Netflix and streaming, but with streaming and the amount of content that's out there, I can just needle and just really narrow down my watching choices to what I want to watch. And therefore I'm inherently
Right.
building myself my own silo, and I won't be exposed to other things because I'm only going to watch what I want to watch, and there's that option there that for me to watch it. So anyway, we're going around in a circle on this, that there's pluses and minuses to it. But there's that's where I think your original question was ivory towers. Do they have more influence or less? And I'd say they have less influence. And there's an argument that could be made that we sort of need a filter, now and then.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I guess, and you're right. We could go on and on about that. I've got sorts of, but so anyway, we're climbing. Oh, okay. So let's. I hate to do this. It sounds so cliche, but I'm going to anyway. In the next 3 to 6 months, not 5 years, in the next 12 months, Gary? What's gonna happen on any front, not just copiers, but what do you feel comfortable talking about? It could be anything in the next 12 months. Where are we going to be this time next year?
Well, I think we're going to be on the upswing of a recession.
Okay.
I think we're going to hit a recession. And I have no fact around
Right.
this.
No, this
I,
is
I just think that it's inevitable that we hit sort of a bump. We have a hard landing in terms of an economy. I also think it's going to be short lived, in that the interest rates will fall as quickly as they've risen the last 12 months, and that we're going to have a recession. We're going to have an economic downturn, but we're going to lower those interest rates back down to 1 or 2 points. And then commercial spending is going to ignite back on, and then consumer spending will follow suit. So we're headed for what I think is going to be a short-term recession. I think the war in the Ukraine will be over this time next year, and that is going to have some really interesting impacts on just Europe and the world as a whole.
yeah, yeah. Funny you mentioned earlier. History repeats. I've caught. I don't know who originally said this, but I stole it. History doesn't repeat; it rhymes. Because I like a couple months ago, I got a bunch of deja vu from the '70s. Right, the oil crisis, the trouble in Iran, the blah blah blah, the malaise. They started saying that word. Interest rates climbing, inflation climbing. I go, wow, this is like Jimmy Carter's back in office. But then I look, and you swung right into it. Yeah, I get the same feeling. Things move faster nowadays, good and bad. So if we do have a recession, I think we can bounce back a lot quicker than it took a decade to get out of that one. It's not going to take a decade to get out of this one. And Philadelphia did not win.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing right there. They didn't. Yeah, the Phillies lost.
Phillies
So we
lost.
can thank
There's no
we
recession.
can thank the Astros for that one for sure.
I'll give him a props for that one. Yeah. Well, Gary, I appreciate the time. Would you like anything you want to end with? I mean, I have to tell you, this is my 13th session. Everyone has gotten better. This one, the transcript has chunks of really good stuff. I mean, it's good. So
it's
thumbs up.
I enjoyed the conversation. It certainly wasn't stuck in the hard copy world or the industry analyst world. So I appreciate that. It's all over the place. I guess one final plug while I'm flickering back and forth is, Gap Intelligence is really putting its toe in the water on the media aspect. So we're sort of analysts that is getting into media with 2 initiatives. One's called the Gaming Tap, which is a free newsletter. Did I say the word free? Yes, a free newsletter to the masses that reports on what's happening in the gaming industry, which if you're not into gaming, your kids are. So give that a spin, thegamingtap.com. And then a guy you may know, Greg, a guy named Greg Walters, is writing a similar newsletter on the office tech industry. So how do you sell technology these days in the B2B world? Greg Walters and the officetech.com. Absolutely fantastic.
Perfect. Excellent. Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it. And that gaming tap, that's cool too. Office tap, excellent. I'm having a lot of fun with it. All right, Gary, I'm going to sign off. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, man. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Greg.
All right. Take it easy. And for everyone, we'll be back again with another thrill-packed session.
Listen.
Enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.